What if the greatest mystery in history is not what was lost, but who decided we were never allowed to look for it? Everyone has heard the story of one famous library burning, one tragic accident, one ancient flame swallowing the wisdom of the world. But what if that story is too small? What if the real question is not why one library burned, but why so many centers of knowledge vanished across different lands, different empires, and different centuries? And what if the ashes were not the ending, but the beginning of a much stranger trail? Picture a young researcher named Elias Ward sitting alone in a university archive at midnight, surrounded by old maps, travel journals, and translated chronicles that nobody had requested in years. Elias was not famous. He was not a professor. He was the kind of researcher institutions ignore until he finds something inconvenient. For months he had been studying lost libraries, not because he believed in hidden empires, but because he wanted to write a simple documentary about destroyed knowledge. Then he noticed the pattern. It started with one note in the margin of a 19th century book. A scholar had written, "The destruction was repeated elsewhere." Elias thought it meant Alexandria. Everyone meant Alexandria, but the note pointed to a list of other archives: temple libraries, royal record rooms, monastery collections, palace vaults, university halls, private scriptoria. Some burned in war, some were ordered destroyed, some simply disappeared from records after new rulers arrived. At first, Elias told himself what every sensible person tells themselves. History is chaotic, fires happen, armies loot, religious leaders destroy rival ideas, kings erase previous kings. Nothing mysterious, nothing connected. But then he spread the dates across his apartment floor. The room became a map of smoke. China, Egypt, Judea, Persia, North Africa, India, Europe. Again and again, the places that vanished were not random storehouses, they were memory centers. They held astronomy, medicine, engineering, genealogy, land records, ancient poetry, calendars, maps, tax lists, star charts, and stories older than the empires that destroyed them. Elias stared at the map until dawn and whispered, "Why does every conqueror fear paper?" That question became an obsession. He began reading about Emperor Qin, who ordered books burned and scholars punished because old ideas threatened the new empire. Elias read about scrolls destroyed in sacred cities, archives burned during sieges, libraries emptied by mobs, universities reduced to smoke over weeks or months. The official explanation was always different. Politics here, religion there, accident somewhere else. But the result was always the same. The old record disappeared. And after it disappeared, a new story took its place. That was the part Elias could not stop thinking about. Every time a library vanished, a new authority explained the past. A new empire told people where civilization began. A new priesthood told people which knowledge was dangerous. A new ruler decided which ancestors counted and which names should be forgotten. So Elias changed his question. Not who burned the books, who benefited after they were gone. One night, while examining a reproduction of an old map, he noticed a city drawn with towers, canals, and strange domed buildings in a region that official histories described as barely developed during that period. The mapmaker had labelled it with a name Elias had seen only in obscure forums and forgotten atlases. Arcania. Not Tartaria, not Atlantis, not any name already buried under arguments. Arcania, a civilization no textbook mentioned. Elias laughed at himself. Perfect. Now I sound insane, but the name kept appearing. Not often. Never clearly. A traveller's journal mentioned the northern builders of Arkan. A monastery inventory listed mathematical tables copied from Arcanian originals. A damaged Persian manuscript referred to the people of the White Towers who measured the heavens in stone. A British antiquarian dismissed Arcania as a myth, then described buildings with heating systems and acoustic chambers he admitted he could not explain. Elias did not claim this proved anything. Proof is heavy, hints are light, but enough hints stacked carefully begin to bend the table. He travelled to an old city in Eastern Europe where the lower floors of buildings sat half buried below street level. Local guides said the streets had risen naturally over time. Elias accepted that explanation at first. Cities do rise, people rebuild, floods deposit mud. Generations stack themselves on top of generations. But in one abandoned government building, he found windows at ground level that looked designed for a second story. Beneath the basement was another basement. Beneath that was a sealed brick arch. The caretaker, an old man named Tomas, saw Elias staring. "You are not the first to look down," Tomas said. "What is behind it?" Tomas shrugged. "They told us nothing. My grandfather said records were stored there before the war. Then men came, took crates and sealed the rest." "What records?" Tomas smiled without humor, the kind no one asks for twice. Elias returned the next morning with permission to photograph the wall. Permission disappeared by afternoon. A city official told him the site was unsafe. The caretaker stopped answering calls. His hotel room was searched while he was out buying coffee. Nothing was stolen except his notebook. That was when curiosity became fear. He flew home and began backing up everything. Maps, notes, photos, translations. He sent copies to 3 friends with one message: "If I vanish, I finally became interesting." But Elias did not vanish. Instead, he received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a photograph of a stone doorway covered in symbols and a note written in blue ink. "You are looking at the smoke. Look for what survived below it. Below it." The photograph led him to a monastery in the mountains, a place famous for its painted walls and silent monks. Tourists came for icons. Elias came for a locked cellar mentioned in an 18th century inventory. The abbot denied knowing anything. Then, as Elias was leaving, a young monk slipped him a key. "Only 1 hour," the monk whispered, "and do not use flash." The cellar door opened into cold darkness. Elias descended with a small lamp. At the bottom was not a library, not exactly. It was a room of fragments, stone tablets, copper plates, charred scroll cases, broken instruments, a bronze gear assembly that looked disturbingly like a machine. On the wall hung a map unlike any he had seen. It showed coastlines accurately. Too accurately. Rivers, mountain ranges, and inland cities marked by symbols that matched the photograph. In the center was the same word, Arcania. Elias found a translated label beneath the map, copy made from an older world survey before the burning of the Western archives. His hands shook. Not because he had found proof of a lost super civilization. He had found something more important, proof that people in the past believed there had been an older record, and that someone had copied pieces of it before destruction arrived. That meant the burnings had not erased everything. They had scattered it. A map in one monastery, a machine fragment in another, a medical recipe hidden inside a prayer book, Star tables disguised as religious calendars, architecture encoded in cathedrals, mosques, temples, and civic buildings whose builders were credited but whose sources were never explained. Elias finally understood the deeper mystery. Maybe the past was not one clean ladder from primitive to advanced. Maybe it was a broken mirror. Every civilization picked up a shard, polished it, and claimed it had invented the reflection. When he returned home, Elias prepared his documentary. He knew what critics would say. They would say patterns are not proof. They would say destroyed libraries do not automatically mean hidden civilizations. They would be right. A serious mind must admit that. But a serious mind must also ask why so much of humanity's memory was repeatedly targeted, controlled, rewritten, and buried. The question matters even without the legend. Because whether Arcania was real or only a name attached to older knowledge, the pattern remains. People in power have always understood that controlling the past controls the future. Burn a library, and you do not only destroy books, you destroy arguments. You destroy alternatives. You destroy the ability of future generations to say, wait, that is not how it happened. And maybe that is why the story of lost libraries feels so haunting. Not because paper burned, paper always burns. It haunts us because somewhere in those ashes were answers to questions we no longer know how to ask. What medicines were lost? What maps? What engineering methods? What histories written by conquered people? What names of women, workers, travelers, inventors, and builders were removed because they made the official story too complicated? Elias ended his film standing in front of a sealed basement entrance in that old European city. Behind him, traffic moved over streets built higher than the original doors. People walked past without looking down. He said, maybe there is no single hidden empire waiting beneath our feet. Maybe there is something even more dangerous. A buried human memory, broken into pieces, hidden under cities, inside monasteries, beneath museums, and in private collections that will never open their doors. The tragedy is not only that libraries burned, the tragedy is that we were taught to stop searching after the flames went out. Then he paused, looking into the camera, because the people who burned knowledge were betting on one thing. They believed future generations would mistake silence for absence. They believed if no record remained, no one would suspect a record had ever existed. But every buried doorway, every strange map, every impossible mechanism, every erased name whispers the same warning. The camera moved closer. The past is not gone, it is hidden. And if even one room survived the fires, one sealed archive, one copied manuscript, one map folded into the back of a forgotten book, then the story of civilization may not be finished. It may simply be waiting for someone curious enough to pull away the first brick.